Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. Today we're having a look at another Devblog for updates Ixwa strike, and this is for the SARC Mk.VI. This is one of the new South African vehicles, which is coming to the British tech tree, and it's going to be at rank 2. There's actually going to be two variants of this, with two different turrets, which are always very fun. Now, the South African reconnaissance cars, as it's known as, the SARC, is also known by another name, the Marmon-Herrington, which was a series of armored cars developed by South Africa during World War II. A pretty interesting design, and very happy that it's coming to the game. A lot of people thought when the South Africa subtree was introduced that it was going to be a just exclusively high-ranking set of vehicles. The fact that it starts at rank 2 I think is a really nice thing, and the fact it starts with the SARC is an even better one. Let's get into the history of this vehicle. The story of the SARC actually starts before World War II in 1938, when a group of South African designers and engineers came together to create a domestic armoured car design. And following the outbreak of World War II, the development of the vehicle was massively accelerated, and a design was created around a 3-ton Ford truck chassis. The problem was, though, South African industry at the time was not there to be able to manufacture all of the components domestically for it, so a lot of them had to be imported from other countries such as Canada, the UK, and also the US for final assembly of the vehicle to happen in South Africa. The SARC entered service with South African forces in 1940 and gradually found its way into the ranks of other allied nations, especially those of the Commonwealth over the next few years. The vehicle gained a good reputation among its crews for its simplicity and also reliability, even though it was rather light, it didn't have a ton of armor, and also was seen as undergunned at the time. And at the height of World War II, between 1942 and 43, the engineers behind the initial design of the SARC wanted to improve its capabilities in an effort to match the Mk.VI 234, which was designed by the Germans. And therefore, the engineers developed a heavier 8-wheeled experimental Mk.V variant, which followed onto the improved Mk.VI prototypes. And only 2 prototypes of the SARC Mk.VI were built. One was armed with a 2-pounder gun, the other one was armed with a 6-pounder gun. And while the former was sent to the UK for testing, the latter remained in South Africa. And despite the fact that its test results were very positive, the increased availability of more suitable American armored cars in the later stages of the war basically meant that the Mk.VI was kind of redundant, and further development on the vehicle itself was cancelled. Luckily, in War Thunder, the idea of a vehicle being a prototype or anything like that is completely acceptable, so therefore we're getting both of the prototypes that we talked about before. We are getting the 2-pounder variant and also the 6-pounder variant, which should both be incredibly fun when it comes to the game. Both are at rank 2. This means that they do get access to the scouting mechanics, which are obviously incredibly important when it comes to these types of vehicles. If one of them was set at rank 1, such as the 2-pounder variant, this would pretty much mean that it wouldn't get scouting, and it would have to rely on the ability of its gun and also its general mobility. And I've got to say, when looking at the SARC, it is much of an interesting design. It is definitely one which is unique and interesting. The problem is, though, it does have a few issues, especially against the majority of vehicles that it's going to face. The 2-pounder variants will obviously have a very fast-firing 2-pounder gun, just like all of the other British vehicles around that BR, and generally the 2-pounder does have a lot of penetration. It is definitely good enough to face the majority of vehicles that it does. The only issue that it really has with it is the lack of post-penetration damage, but this is fine because you have such a good reload. As long as you aim for key components with the first shot, you won't have too many issues with it. It also has a bunch of machine guns alongside it, which will help with AA capabilities and also just generally marking targets if you miss with the Scout. The 6-pounder version obviously has a little bit more of a kick. The 57mm QF 6-pounder gun is a very good gun. If you've ever used it on either the Crusader or the Cromwell, you will know how effective this gun is. The AP rounds, once again, high penetration, a decent reload for the size of the gun that it has, and also the post-pen damage, which is lacking from the 2-pounder. And this means that this machine will be able to pack a hell of a punch. The other difference between the two variants is the 6-pounder variant has access to a 50 cal on top of it, and generally that will be much better for AA defense. It will also be much better for stuff such as the additions of well, it will also be better for dealing with lighter vehicles if it ever comes across them, so you know, you don't have to worry too much about them. The other thing is this machine is powered, both variants, by 2 diesel engines, and both of the engines combined have an output of 190 horsepower. Now this isn't a ton, you know, it's not a lot of horsepower, but at the end of the day, it isn't that much of a heavy machine. Its horsepower to ton isn't too bad, and it can get up to 40 miles per hour or 65 kilometers an hour on roads, and 25 miles per hour, 40 kilometers an hour cross country. With its 8-wheel chassis, it should be able to deal with rough conditions a little bit easier than some of its counterparts, which only have a 4-wheeled set, meaning that it should be better in desert conditions, snow conditions, which normally wheeled vehicles struggle with, but hopefully this one will be a little bit better. The other thing about it is its armor. Its armor isn't great. Its armor doesn't really exist, meaning that it will just get auto-cannoned down quite easily. There is a lot of space in the vehicle, with the crew very much being mounted near the front of the vehicle, meaning that you may get lucky and somebody shoots straight through you, kind of like how that's going to happen with the Ratel as well, where there's a lot of empty space in it, so therefore you might be able to get the second shot off. But the general issue you're going to have is you're a large vehicle with very low armor, and no spaced armor, you know, to deal with. It also has what I like to call the Valentine sweet spot. The Valentine sweet spot on a vehicle is a frontal area that is flat, which has no armor, which is a kind of hit me spot. If you look at the Valentine tank in the game, you can see the driver's area, and the driver's area is a flat piece, and it's just a very inviting target to shoot at. Well, the SARC has the same thing, and if you shoot it right there, you will kill all of the crew, meaning that it will be incredibly easy to take this thing out. So the fact that it doesn't have, you know, a lot of survivability, it doesn't have a small silhouette, it's actually a pretty big silhouette, but it does have pretty powerful armaments. My feeling for these vehicles is they're going to be ones which you will have to play passively, let the enemy push you, and then you smash them with the guns. That will be the main way to play these things, instead of as an aggressive scout, which we can see from other vehicles which do really well, like the M56 Scorpion, the T92, vehicles of this ilk. The fact that we're getting more light vehicles for the British tank tech tree is incredibly important. It's one of the things that's been missing for an incredibly long time. A lot of people have asked for a British light tank line. I'm also one of those people, and there are generally a ton of vehicles that could be added to this set of scouts. I feel like light tanks and scouting in general is very much underappreciated when it comes to War Thunder. It's a very good mechanic and incredibly important to be able to let your team know where the enemy is. It's one of those which really can swing a battle very, very easily. If you are sat in a scenario where you can see the whole of the enemy team and the enemy team can't see you, and your team know where the enemy team is, that gives you such a massive advantage on the battlefield, and I feel that that should be pushed forward when it comes to, or it should be something that people recognize and something that people use going forward with these vehicles, and have a little bit of fun with it. One of the other things as well is the fact that all of these South African vehicles are in the British tech tree. It's also a big positive thing. Instead of an independent tech tree where you would have to start off with 0 crew skills once again, and you would have to, grind up your crews alongside the vehicles, and it can be quite a bad experience for a lot of players, especially, when we look at vehicles or when we look at trees which have a lot of copy and paste stuff, such as China. A lot of people get put off the trees because of that. The fact that you can come in here and have your British crews and use them in these South African vehicles just means that the general grind for the vehicles will be a lot easier to do, and also a big advantage of doing this sub-tree idea. And I really hope that they focus on this and push forward with this idea, because it gives a lot more variation to the game. It means people can experience a lot of really interesting and unique designs, and also it means we can get more countries represented, therefore individuals can feel like they are being represented in the game, which is incredibly important. Anyway, I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. I'd just like to thank Teddy, John Ryman, Universe, Conte Baraka, Trigger Hippie, Eugens Terry, Ambrosius McClellan, Daniel Stanton, Martinez, B. Young, Hosest Kishore, Hans, Bareen, and Samuel Schlick for supporting the channel.